Anyway, we'll get started in the long jump here. The first thing that we got to make sure we're working on is instructing a proper penultimate step. That is hitting that flat concept on your last two steps in order for you to get that bump, into the pit, getting off the board quickly and effectively. Second, we're going to work on, developing a consistent approach, making sure that we have the rhythm, the timing, we're correcting ourselves. We have good targeting on the runway to make sure that we have an effective jump. And then, of course, understanding the takeoff and understanding flight mechanics as well, learning how to slow down rotation when you're in midair to get everything you can, out of, controlling that aerial movement. And then finally, we'll talk about the entry. And the entry is something that I always feel is very, very undervalued. You can get just a smidgen of extra inches with having a good pluck and pull concept. And we'll talk about that going forward here. But let's go into the next slide. Okay, we're going to talk in more detail here on the penultimate step. Penultimate is just simply the step before last. It sets up proper takeoff position. It allows you to get that subtle bump within your jump. So that way we're not braking too much, but we're not just simply running over our plant as well and towing the board. So the last two steps are a flat foot concept. I kind of try to teach it like it's a rocking chair principle. It's a heel to toe, run off on the last two steps. We're on our toes as we're running down the runway. We're on our forefoot, but those last two steps, we want to have a flat concept where we're not dropping our hips, but we're hitting that position so that way we can get that solid bump. Goes to my next point. Your hips are going to remain high. You don't want to drop your hips into your penultimate. We don't want to break through it. We want to feel like we're almost having that concept of dipping and driving, but it's more of a reaction than it is trying to force it. It's a lot like I feel like you're hitting a pothole. If you're driving your car down the road, 25 miles per hour, you hit that pothole, you drop into it, but of course on the other side, you bump right up and then boom, that's that natural bump or reaction that you get when you hit that pothole. It's the same concept you want to feel when you're actually hitting your penultimate step. This allows essentially three things to occur. Your Achilles is primed for takeoff. You got proper dorsiflexion. Your toes are pulled up. You're ready to let that rubber band loose. And that minimum, drop and the height allows that bump or hitting that pothole like I just talked about. But then finally, it provides correct front side distance for the takeoff leg to enable proper rotation. So essentially, we want to hit that flat foot concept. We want to get that plant foot just slightly in front of our center so that when we hit into that takeoff position, we're right up top, we're getting our foot right under our hips and we're bumping that jump out and we're projecting off of that board. And I'll break down video with that as we go. The approach, okay. The first thing that I try to teach, from an approach perspective, and this is where max velocity comes in, where acceleration comes in, is you want to find each athlete's fastest point of velocity. Everybody's obviously different. Not everybody's the same speed. Some people take longer to get to top speed. Some are shorter. My whole point is, don't just put everybody at a certain distance or at a certain amount of steps. If don't 8-step an athlete, if 7 will do to get them in that position. We don't want to turn the runway into, them being so far back that they end up, getting to the board and they're already, starting to ramp down on that max velocity, hitting that crescendo too late. And now we're almost just flopping through the pit instead of being, aggressive and really feeling crowded at that board and driving. I kind of teach the approach in, I guess, 3 phases. I don't want to try to overthink the approach, but it's nice to kind of have some transitions within your approach. And this is kind of how I break it down. So I'll just mind you, when I say 6 steps, that's total steps that you're taking, or if it's 3 lefts, 3 rights. I know I put up top here, don't 8-step if 7 will do. That's technically 8 lefts or 8 rights, 7 lefts, 7 rights. But this is talking about the first 6 steps on the acceleration phase. These must be consistent. This is where jumpers will foul majority of the time because they're either going to spin their wheels when they get excited. They're going to shorten their arms. They're going to really want to, turn their wheels over. And the next thing you know, they're actually too short to the board. They're behind the board. Or sometimes you have athletes that will push out harder than normal. They'll get really big. And then they end up trying to lengthen out their position. And by the time that they get to the board, now they're over. Keep this consistent. I always talk about pushing out the back hard. building into that top end speed, be aggressive, but just start that rhythm and use those levers, use your arms to really help push out the back to set it up. We'll put a cone down for athletes when they start to work on their approach. Where are your first 6 steps and hitting that mark every single time? So if you're at 110 feet for your total approach, and your first 6 steps gets you to, let's just say, 80 feet, you want to make sure that you're hitting that spot every single time. If you're hitting your first 6 steps or your first 3 lefts or rights every single time in that spot, chances are you're going to be on that board every single time too. Second is the rhythm phase. This is the next 6 to 8 steps or 3 to 4 lefts, rights. This is where that athlete builds into the crescendo of the jump. You pushed out the back, so you're getting to tall, you're pushing out the back, and now you're in that rhythm phase where we're setting up that speed that we want to carry into the pit. You want to feel bouncy, you want to feel relaxed, you want to feel fast, you want to feel tall. You really want to make sure that you're sprightly going down the runway. And this is where that steering comes in, finding that position, pushing out the back, finding that rhythm to be able to then gather into your plant, which is the third phase here. So that gathering phase. This is the last 4 steps or last 2 rights or lefts. This is where an athlete must be aggressive through the board, while keeping postural integrity. We don't want to be leaning through the board. We don't want to be far back. We want to feel like, we're locking our core in, we're engaged, we're ready to go. And this is where you can cue the athlete to feel crowded at the board. This prevents reaching. We don't want to stutter step, of course, but we should feel like, we got to get that foot down to almost jump off that cliff. We don't want to feel like we're reaching to get to the board, because then we're just going to end up breaking, and then we're end up having a hard time, feeling that bump because we're too far behind the board. The athlete should feel reactive through the board. Try to have the board almost scare you. I kind of try to tell you to, scare the crap out of the board, or have the board scare you. Once again, you do not force this phase. I love telling athletes, hey, push out the back, find your rhythm, feel crowded at the board, and let's bump one out. So hopefully that kind of makes sense to you on the approach.